I'd like to welcome our first speaker of the Digital Academy, Adrian Schleifenbaum. He grew up in a village in Westerwald, and he actually lives with his family in Giessen. He studied theology in Oberursel, Heidelberg, Marburg, and Nottingham. And during his time in Nottingham, he participated in a church, and there he experienced an ecclesiological practice which differs much from that what he knew, and he wondered if something alike would be possible in Germany. That was something he explored in his dissertation, which he did at the University of Heidelberg, and which is named Kirche als Akteurin der Zivilgesellschaft, Church as an agent of civil society, which appeared in Göttingen last year. Now he is working in Gießen as a pastor, and he tries to put what he has experienced and explored into good use. Moreover, he will present us in this lecture aspects of the relationship between participation and Protestantism. Protestantism emphasizes for itself the equality of all the baptized. The priesthood of all believers literally stands for this. It is now interesting to examine the statement for its practical meaning. Here, an individual claim is made to participation in a special religious quality. But to what extent is this also connected with a concrete individual obligation? Does active participation in the ecclesial and secular community as a task belong to the Protestant understanding of the Church just as much as passive participation in the spiritual community? In this lecture, the Digital Academy, we explore the question of how constitutive participation is for a Protestant understanding of Church. We will start with a paper of Adrian Schleifenbaum, and then we will have some time to discuss questions in small groups. But first of all, we will start with the Mentimeter and some questions. I just have to look if there is already. Yes, you will find the link to the Mentimeter in the chat, and I beg you to answer the questions now. So here are the results. All that wanted to take part in Mentimeter now submitted their vote, and I think it's really an interesting result with a little gap between participation at the local church and participation in other spheres or clubs or the society, so to say. I think that will be interesting to discuss later on. But first of all, I'd like to give the room for Adrian Schleifenbaum and his lecture.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me. I'm Adrian Schleifenbaum. I believe my surname is very much unspeakable for some tongues, so you may just prefer to me as Adrian by my first name. That is absolutely fine under those circumstances.
Hear you still?
Can you hear me?
Microphone.
Can you hear me now? It had okay. Okay, the chat says people can hear me. That is a good sign, I guess.
No, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna start the screen sharing now. Okay, so Protestantism and participation. This is our topic. I wrote my dissertation on pretty much on that topic. Today we're going to figure out why it is, why we benefit from participating in church and civil society. First, I'm going to give you a small outlook on the evening. You're going to hear me talking a lot about the different theories of participation in the first part, and we're going to have two different theories based on a sociological perspective, and then I'm going to give you two different theological approaches to participation and why it is important. After that, it's your turn, and we're going to discuss in breakout sessions why it is that we should participate in church or civil society. And every theory is well and nice, but it means barely anything without a proper experience. And so I'm going to introduce two different ways of combining Protestantism and participation. The first is from the Fresh Expressions of Church, a movement that started in the United Kingdom. In Germany, we just call it Fresh X. And then another approach which is called in German Gemeinwesenorientierung, very hard to pronounce. It's something like Protestant social welfare work. And after that, it's back to you again. You're not here just to learn. We are also gathered together here to learn from each other. And so I want to know, what can we learn from your experiences in participating? So let's dive into the sociological part. I have two theories for you that very much shaped the discourse on participation in the social sciences. First is from James Coleman. More than 30 years ago, he introduced to sociology the term social capital. By the term, you can already guess that he is from the United States. I think it's a very American idea to capitalize on your social network. We're going to look into that idea. And then we're going to talk about Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, a groundbreaking study from 2000. So here we have James Coleman. He looks very 80s here. And he's when he introduced the topic of social capital to the social sciences, well, he had a very complicated way of writing. He called it social capital is not something you possess like your money or your car, your house. It is something that adheres in the structure of relations between actors. So basically, social capital happens between you and your friends, you and your family, you and the old acquaintances you have that you fall out of contact, but you still have their number in your phone, and you can reactivate those contacts. And in the 80s, Coleman found something that was very interesting. He realized that the dropout rates in American high schools were much lower in Catholic schools than they are in public schools. And so he wondered, how can that be? Is it because it's not a matter of faith? It's not because people are Catholic and that is why they're so much smarter or anything. And so he realized that especially the parents gather not only once a year for some student-teacher association or something, but they meet regularly on church services. And so when they, after the service, they meet on Sunday school or they have a barbecue, and there they would also talk about school issues, which then means, of course, the parents keep a much closer eye on their children and how they are doing at school. And this led Coleman to the belief that the amount of contacts you have is basically beneficial to your human capital. Your human capital, that is your education level, the skills you have. And so he proposed that theory, and what really stuck was the term social capital. Somewhat later, Robert Putnam worked further on the idea of social capital and what it actually is and how we benefit from it. And he realized that in the United States in the 90s, the amount of people who take part in a bowling club is in a vast decline. And he said that is not just something, a small change in the way people spend their free time. It is actually something that is a huge problem for us as society, not because people lose their fitness or their skills by throwing a ball. The problem is that people lose their contacts, because when they meet on a Friday night at some bowling alley, they would also interact. They would talk about, their problems at home or the joys of life. And also being an American, he has a very cheesy story about a bowling club, how two people, one man fell ill and he had to lose his kidney, and he found a kidney donor in his bowling club. That was just to stress and underline how important it is to meet in social clubs. And I think after 2 years of COVID, every one of us knows how important it is to have social community. And now Robert Putnam, he gave the social sciences a very important differentiation between weak ties and strong ties. Strong ties, he writes, this is what gives you chicken soup when you're sick. It's your best friends, your family, those people you interact with regularly. But the weak ties, those are your distant acquaintances. Those are contacts that give you maybe information about a new job offer or something like that. For example, if you were to take part in this exercise we see on the picture here, you would meet people, you don't know them, you don't have the same educational or some cultural backgrounds, but for this afternoon you meet and you chat and relax and have a nice experience, and maybe you will get a nice job offer out of it or any other clue. And compared to that, the strong ties, those lead to bonding. So these relationships, they are much more dependable, much more, they take much more time. And those shape social norms and identities, which is actually a good thing, depending on the norms, of course. But they tend to happen within a given social circle. For example, look at those three blokes we have here. You could only belong to them, to their social club, probably being a white male who works in the same office space or something like that. And this is the problem about strong ties. They happen within a given community, like immigrants from some minority or women of a certain political party, and they interact with each other, and in order to belong you would have to be one of them. So as a society in whole, you want both. You want social capital to consist of identity-giving strong ties. But if you have a society that consists mainly of in-groups that are exclusive to each other, a society loses cohesiveness. And so that is why you really need those weak ties that link different communities. And just one word, because I worked a lot about the Protestant church. We have that ideal that church is open to everyone, that we are a club where everyone, no matter your gender, your social background, your culture, you could join us, our doors open. But actually what we can see is that we are very much exclusive, at least in the Protestant church in Germany. Try looking for example, people of color in our boards of leadership. You will find very, very few. So we are not as open as we think. We are a much more exclusive club. Now let's look at two different theological approaches to participation. The first comes from this book, from Sabrina Müller. She's from Swiss, a very smart and exciting scientist. And she wrote a dissertation on fresh expressions of church in 2016. And it's a qualitative empirical study. So basically, she went to the UK, talked to a lot of people from the fresh expression movements, and she really found out that many of those who do church in a fresh expressions way, we're going to talk about that later, they have a very strong idea why they do it. They do it from, they have the idea driven from a biblical passage. We're going to read it. I'm very excited about it. It's the first time ever I read from scripture in one of those lectures. And it's not an exegesis or anything. It's just where they got the idea from. And you will realize it's a lot about participating. So Paul wrote in Philippians 2, Christ encourages you and his love comforts you. God's spirit unites you and you are concerned for others. Now, make me completely happy. Live in harmony by showing love for each other. Be united in what you think as if you were only one person. Talking about strong ties here, by the way. Care about others as much as you care about yourselves and think the same way that Christ Jesus thought. And now here comes the fun part. Christ was truly God, but he did not try to remain equal with God. Instead, he gave up everything and became a slave. When he became like one of us, Christ was humble, he obeyed God and even died on a cross. Then God gave Christ the highest place and honored his name above all others. So at the name of Jesus, everyone will bow down, those in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. And to the glory of God the Father, everyone will openly agree, Jesus Christ is Lord. Now, a couple of ideas that informed the British Fresh Expressions movement from this biblical passage. First is God, he left the comfort zone and became a human being of a certain time, certain age, culture, as an outer shape or form. This is, by the way, not an historically accurate photo. I think camels did not exist in Israel or Palestine 2,000 years ago. Still bear with me. And the actual goal of that shape and form is for God to have fellowship and to participate in a community. Because when Jesus, as it's said in Philippians, was still in the heavens with God and did whatever God does in the heavens, I don't know, he had community with God. And and only being a human, he could have, or God could have, community with other fellow humans, with his family, with Romans, with his disciples, however weird that was. And so the British Fresh Expressions movement took from that the idea of incarnation as a role model. And they said, having community is a goal worth leaving one's comfort zone behind, which is mainly addressed to those who do church as a vicar or something like that. And it means maybe in order to have community, you would have to give up your culture as a highly educated white male and have to join something that is very much not your culture. Then another point is what participation looks like depends heavily on the culture in which it happens. Participation, for example, in an online network in social media is very different to what happened 50 or 15 years ago in Europe. And another motive from this biblical passage is that participation changes who you are, and it changes those who participate with you. So it's not a one-way street. For the fresh expressions movement, the idea of mission is very important. And they took from it the idea that mission is not telling people what to believe and how to behave, but mission is much more participating in a community of a given time, age, and culture. And in the United Kingdom, they have something, or they have a horrific term for it. They call it pioneer missioning. I'm very against calling something pioneer stuff because it's very military oriented, the language itself. But what they do, I think, is good. They say like someone who is an Afghan immigrant in the United Kingdom, he knows the culture of other Afghan immigrants, and they should have church in an Afghan immigrant way, and that is a good way of doing church. And mission then means living among people and being shaped by them and shaping them, and it means searching with a community for what it may mean that Jesus Christ is Lord. So it's not as much like we give you the answer, it's more like we search for answers. So this was one way of understanding participation in a theological manner. The other one is not taken from a biblical passage, but from the experience of a German missionary, Theo Sundermeier. He's very old, but still alive and kicking. And back in the day, he worked as a missionary in South Africa. And there he worked during the time of apartheid, and he worked a lot with native Black communities. And so he was constantly confronted with the question, how can I work and live with the Black native community as a white European without perpetuating power dynamics and stereotypes, without a guilty consciousness, but with a curious and open mind. So he was very much aware of the burden that Europe brought to South Africa in the colonial developments. And he tried to just work with it. And what he came up with was a concept he named convivence. Those who know Latin realize it means living together, and it has 3 pillars. The first is learn from each other, which is a curiosity, him being a missionary, and he was supposed actually to just go out there and teach people, and then his concept is, no, I'm not a teacher, I'm also a student. And what he found is that he tried to treat everyone as their own teacher. And what happened was he regularly visited a community of Black native people in their village. And he said, my job was just to listen and to ask questions. And I learned from the perspectives and experience of these people. They asked me to write down their story, and they, after a certain amount of time and a certain relationship that was built on trust, they gave them their accounts of their village's history. And he said probably no European has ever heard that before, and they asked him to write it down and read it to them again so that they could say it's right or wrong, and so that he could publish it, which he did. And there he said he experienced that actually everyone is a teacher, everyone has a life's experience worth being taught to others. The next pillar of convivence he experienced in South America, where he also worked for a certain time. And what he said there, what he experienced was people shared, and they did not share out of guilty consciousness or as something you would have to do. For example, on Christmas time, every year I would give a certain amount of money to some NGO, and he said that is not proper sharing in the way of convivence. What is proper sharing is you just live in a community, you realize you have tomatoes in your backyard, somebody wants to do bolognese, and then you would give from what little you have. And that is just a matter of living together. And the last pillar, he said, is most important, is to celebrate, because when you celebrate as a community, you take a break from everyday life, and that it has a transformative dynamic to it. And he said, he talked about a colleague, maybe being cheeky, I think he might have talked about himself when he told this account. He said, a colleague of mine tried to gain access to his community, being a missionary. And he always wanted to be invited into people's house or invite other people into his house to just share and have community, but nobody would invite him. And so then there was a street party, and people were dancing, and he tried to participate and chat with people, but nobody wanted to chat. People wanted to dance. And he said he was German. I cannot dance. You know, I move like a stick. And so people had a laugh and showed him how to move. He probably did a horrible job, but still they had a nice time on that street party. And he said, ever since I got invited into people's houses, and ever since that night, I was part of that communion, of that community. And so, yeah, celebrate life because of its transformative dynamics. So that was my lecture on the theories on 4 different perspectives on participation. And now it's your turn. I would love to know, what is your opinion? Why should we as Protestants participate? And maybe, just maybe, you also have a very own view on maybe there's a theological reason for participating. I gave you the account of the whole idea of incarnation. Maybe you have something similar or very much different from that as a theological reason. And now I think it's Marcel Kehr who organizes the breakout session.
Yes, thank you very much, Adrian, for this lecture. I think we will be sent out to the breakout sessions soon. And I think we'll find the questions in the chat if you cannot remember what Adrian Schleifenbaum said. I think it would be fine if you would take some notes. We prepared a board, and I think you will find the link in the chat as well. And maybe any group should decide who will present the results after the breakout session, so that we can share our results with one another and have a look what other groups talked about. I think so, yes. I hope you've had interesting discussions in your breakout sessions, and it would be nice to have an overview about the results that you've noted down. Does anybody like to say something about the notes?
Good evening. Yes, I can say some sentences to what we discussed. So theologically, we summarized that from Matthew 28, we have this demand or task to participate in the world, because we should go outside and teach and baptize, but also listen and learn from the others. And for us, participation in other groups is also an opportunity to think outside the box. What is important to be critical with one's own beliefs and opinions. So what Adrian said about shaped by them and shaping them. And also we discussed that church sometimes is a special sacral room to some people. So they do not want to enter this room, maybe because they think they are not holy enough or something like that. And so it is important to participate, to go outside to other rooms, to have community with those who are shy to come inside a church. And also theologically, we summarized that Jesus was also going outside. He met the people on the streets, and he did not stay in the synagogues. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can we continue with the second group?
We haven't actually time to decide that, so just step up. I hope to do it okay. We had different questions, a lot of questions we talked about. So the first question was, what kind of groups are our churches? Because we also come from different backgrounds, and we talked about maybe small communities, very strong ties. And so also we need more connection to also worldly or social clubs, because then we need more weak ties for our life. It would be an anthropological reason. But also you have some churches where we have like weak ties, because churches consist of different groups, like rich people, also less rich people. So one of us talked about Bourdieu and his social capital. And we also need connections to people with higher social capital to raise one's own human or social capital. And also we talked about maybe churches need more weak ties, because we need people with different cultures to have more potential to change as a church and to adapt to the situations we are in, and also to be more open to other people, because then we are more diverse groups, so it's easier to enter for other persons. When we talked about what is church, is it like participation in the Sunday service, or is it more like more than that? And we talked about liquid ecclesiology. So the vision which Christ is, and Christ is in the world, there's also church. And we thought about the biblical text where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there's church, like that in our minds. And also we said like there needs to be some criteria where is church, because then every talk with every person should be church, and we take it everywhere with us. So we talked about maybe we also need groups where we are in the story of God and the world, and we can share this story, and there's groups of plausibility to connect with each other. And another way we could participate in the world specifically would be, I think the citation it came from Thomas von Aquin, I think the person said that, and is we have to preach in the world, but only if necessary with words. So also with our works of love in our social work, and Christians and church has a lot of social work. And we thought about a theological reason, maybe like more of a pneumological view from Corinthians maybe. So we do need a group of Christians to correct each other and to also give us new perspectives. So if we would be and stay alone, we couldn't correct each other and don't have such a good community and learn in the ways of Christ together.
But we talked a lot about participation, and we found both arguments for and against. Like for the things that were here already, like Christian love, and you can't really be a Christian or a person living in this world without participating at least in some of its aspects, and maybe then what would speak against it would be the isolation that would lead like to deeper spiritual life in Protestantism. But yeah, like the main motto was, you can't really live without it. It's not possible.
Who likes to say some additional words? Juliet.
Yes, I think the group 3 wrote on our on our paper. This is the violet sentences, and we wrote in red. I said that I thought it funny that we're talking about participating and being young people, because it's so hard for young people to participate in churches in my country, in France, but I guess it's not the only place. But we saw that in Estonia, social contacts are not so easy, but actually there are a lot of young people engaging in churches. And in Germany, Volkmar talked about statistics saying that there is a relationship between being engaged in church community and being engaged in society. If you're engaged in a church community, you have more chances of participating in society, in other clubs and associations. And we had also the question of, do we have to participate to be member of the church? Should we say that participating is mandatory to be a good Christian? Maybe we don't have to be too fundamentalistic about it, but we did not have so many answers. Maybe we will have more time to talk about it. And we had a lot of theological reasons. I'm not sure I've wrote every reasons we had, but we talked about in Matthew 13, I think, but maybe I'm wrong, being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. So having prophetic voices as Christians can also lead us to participate in society. We had also the question of the Trinity, that because God is not one, but he is three in one, it also leads us to not stay alone and to come in community, come in society. And then we had the metaphor of the body with different members, where we have to stay together and help each other, because we are one body. We're the body of Christ, we're church. And so we cannot let some members go away, and we have to acknowledge that we are diverse, and we can also only work together. And that's why we can participate in associations where we will help other people, where we help poor people, refugees, women, children, etc. And the last sentence, I'm discovering it with you. There is an old myth. Our beings and souls are not ultimately separated. Ultimately, we are one in God. Yeah. This is what we did.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are group 5. So we first started to discuss about the question about the word should. That was somehow interesting to us, because we discovered that this could be misleading, because participation should be actually on a free basis, not like with an imperative, but on a free basis, and also outside the church. And what we then were thinking about is that this quote from Philippians could be a good basis, or for a theological reason, to participate on a free basis. That is like to have this indicative that Jesus himself became, or God himself became human. And to become like Jesus Christ actually means to become fully human. And if we go now into the Christological debate or discussion, and that means to become fully human is like to be a part of your community with your family and friends and so on. So this is maybe the first reason, or the first motivation, or the first big why to participate, because God did it. And we continued this discussion about this a little bit. Then, of course, the commandment to love one's neighbor, but also that human were created for and in community to share it. And one interesting thing, maybe motivated from, was it Sundermeier, like this aspect of learn to discover God in other phases and communities, when we are believing that God is above our church, above and further, is going further and above our church and our boundaries and so on, then it's also possible to discover him somewhere where, like in new places, new areas, I mean, in social communities where we as Christians, or maybe as the church, never would go, or never have been, I don't know, and God is already there, and then to be open for that and to learn from the people, and like to have this adventure of discovering God in other spaces. Yeah, then we had a really interesting observation. One participant of our group, he's from the Ukraine, and he told us about his about the situation of his local church there, and his discovering observation here in Germany, that in Germany there's a tendency that the churches are outsourcing a lot of social work, for example, to NGOs or something similar. And he's saying that in the Ukraine, the local churches are responsible for that, and they are participating a lot in social work. And so actually every church member who is participating in the church service and so on is also participating in a lot in social work. The same in Brazil, and actually in Germany, for example, immigration, Russian-German migration churches, there's also like this, that there are big communities who also participating like in different social works and so on. So, and yeah, that's actually all what we shared together. Thank you.
Thank you. We group 6, who would like to say something?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the word koinonia in the New Testament, that it plays this role in shaping a community, but it also is a part of like participating in the church. And then also that the church is where you take care of other people and are being taken care of yourself, and that the church kind of transform you and give you a richer life. And then from like, yeah, also that participation was important for Laura, because you worship God, we hear the sermons as food for our spiritual health, plus getting the communion. And then the reason kind of comes from the scripture and the church life itself. And the church and in communion, like where 2 or 3 are gathered, there you can find God. Yeah, then I can't see the rest of what it says. Like that. And then it's important, we think to participate in church life and take part of the administrative part of the church, because without the participation, it would bring a form of clericalization of the church, essentially in the end, where there's just one guy deciding everything. And then it also brings a form of leadership. It brings like ownership when you share in the power of the church. Yeah, and then there was sometimes it's hard to connect with people, so there might be a difference between the ideal of a community and actual participation. And then we talked about that it's also a place for forgiveness, even though we are sinners being there. So it's a place where we can kind of, yeah, stay and be who we are.
So we also talked about a lot of things. We first talked about the question whether it's important to participate only in church or the world, or in both sides, for example. And we said there are tendencies sometimes to avoid the focus on the world and focus only on church. But also at the same time, it's careful to at the same time, it's important to be careful to not focus only on one side. Also, like, because if you avoid the church and only focus on the world, on the other hand, there are some problems about losing the Christian identity, the Christian way, or simply forget the reasons why we are Christians, which also brings a lot of different problems for the community. And then we had kind of the discussion about as a Christian, aren't you participating in church with being baptized, or do you have to like really participate with lots of actions? And we said you should also go to service, be an active member in church. I mean, there we had like a lot of different ways to be active in church. It doesn't only have to be like go to service. There are a lot of other different activities you can do. But we said that it's important to not only like get the entry fee, a bit like that with being baptized, but also like do a bit more for the community. And one of our group members, she's currently in Taizé. She said they're the brothers who are probably a good example for that, because there are a lot of really active in the world, but they also take a lot of time to focus on themselves. They're alone in prayer and do a lot of stuff for their own community. So they kind of live the differences between both worlds quite good. So yeah, and then we had the discussion about participation, about theological aspects and social aspects. And we had that sometimes you don't have to participate only in church, because there are regions, like if you have problems with your church in your hometown for whatever reasons, you can still meet up with people who think like the same way, and meet up in free time for prayers, do your own activities, like also go to another church group in like the town over. And yeah, and also in the last minutes we mentioned the Confessio Augustana, like a big point for the theological aspects to participate, because it's like the document which is really important for participation, even if you have a lot of different points of views, but you have this common ground that is important to find. And sometimes it's really important to just focus on this common ground, and not only to focus on what our difference. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this interesting aspects, and I think we would have missed a lot if we would not have taken the time to listen and to read those notes. So we're a bit later than we expected, but now we turn to the second part of the lecture, and so I'd like to turn over to Adrian Schleifenbaum again.
Okay, so now I'm gonna introduce two different types of participating movements in the Protestant Church to you. The first is, you've heard that term by now quite some time, the fresh expressions of church. I hope the video works out. Yeah.
This is church. That is clear for all to see. This is church.
Mm-hmm.
And this is church. And this is church too. And definitely church. And do you know what you can do here? You can pray. You can share with others. Here we go. You can learn. You can get to meet new people. And do you know who it's for? Well, church is for me, and it's for him, and her. It's for these guys. It's for all of us, and it's definitely for you.
So this was a introductory video to Fresh Expressions of Church, they said church is for everyone. And what it means is church as an abstract concept, maybe for everyone. But there's not the one church which is a fit to everyone. Much more, the Fresh Expressions movement says every community, every sub-community has to find their own way of doing church, their own style. And therefore, there's church for everyone, but it's very different churches. It could be a soccer club or a messy church for children. And so you would have a lot of strong ties communities, and church happens within such a strong tie community. Now, the goal for the Fresh Expressions movement is to have discipleship and be formational, which means, well, that is my interpretation of it now. It means searching for a way within such a strong tie community of how to understand that Jesus Christ is Lord, as we've heard in Philippians. So usually one of those Fresh Expressions groups has 30 to 150 members, and you become a member by participating only, actually, because it's a very strong network. And if you appear on the events, if you have a laugh with them, if you read the scripture with them, then you would be considered a member. And that also means that this type of church depends a lot on your own, on their own members' engagement. Usually, there's not a lot of money involved. There are not ministers or vicars to tend to their flocks, but it's much more that the people, the members themselves, organize and fund their group. So that is very participating heavy church. I'm gonna introduce two different styles of Fresh Expressions groups in Germany. There is the Unblack network. It's a church network from people and for people within the heavy metal and festival community. In order to participate, you would probably have to look a bit like that. And it's taken from their website. So this is what they do. They go to the heavy metal concerts. They have their community. They have online services and do church service in a very heavy metal way. I think they shout their songs, their worship songs. Not my cup of tea, but if you are a metalhead, you would probably love it. And another example, another community would be the Café Bohnenheld. It's in the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest area. There they founded a cafe, which, well, it's an average cafe where you can get your cappuccino, but they have, for example, one table that is reserved for those who just want to have a chat and who have something on their mind. And so you can go to that cafe and just sit down on that specific table, and then someone will come and listen to you and talk to you. Or they have a lot of concerts where they try to get money for a good cause, help to Ukraine, something like that. Which shapes their identity. And here it's a bit different. Here it's a very strong tie-in group, which is connected with loose ties to the wider community. So this is, now you have an idea of the Fresh Expressions movement. And I try to make it fast because I think we're running out of time. But I do want to tell you about the Protestant social welfare work, Gemeinwesendiakonie. This is a very different approach to participation, but what they do usually is quite the same like in Fresh Expressions, but they have a very different mindset. The first question is, like, as a church, as a local church, would be, what does our neighborhood need? Who actually are our neighbors? And what are the different communities that live around us? What are their needs? And once you've you found out what those needs are, you would find other social agents like the diaconie, like other social welfare agents. And I'm going to give you one example of a church that did it very famously. There's a whole book written about it from the minister Ralf Kötter, Das Land ist hell und weit. The Lukas Church in the very rural West Germany, and they have one problem there. It's young people move out of the villages, and the old ones, they kind of are left behind. And so you would have a decline in the availability of doctors and dentists. You have a decline in supermarkets who just closed their doors. And so the local church sat down with pretty much everyone in the villages who has a social say, like the employers, the supermarkets, government agencies, school, other churches. And they try to figure out a way to meet the needs of their neighbors. And what they did is they involved the elderly in the school, who then help to teach the kids or play with the kids. For those who were not able to drive, because there's many villages that are very far from each other. And for those, they bought a bus and found volunteers to drive people from A to B. And they all did it as a church, but they did stuff that is very unchurchy, actually. That is more the job of an NGO or of the government, actually. But they did it nonetheless. And what happened is it basically transformed the whole church. So they started to do church services with people who are disabled and address their needs. Here you have on the picture, you have their board of directors from, and you can see it's kind of a young, diverse crowd, as diverse as it gets in rural Germany, at least. So it really changed the identity of that church, to really ask, how can we participate in our neighborhood? And what happened was, not only did the church participate in the neighborhood, but the neighborhood started to participate in their church. So I did it very fast. I hope I didn't do it too fast. Still, now it's your turn again. I would like to know, what are your experiences in participating with your communities? Do you or anyone else benefit? And then we remember Sundermeier. Did you learn anything helpful tonight for your own practices? And also, what can we as a church learn from your experiences participating?
Thank you very much, Adrian. We will be sent to breakout rooms again. I think we will meet nearly in the same groups as we met before, so that we won't have to spend too much time in introductions again, and we can start the discussion on the topics at once. So, and I think we will have again about 10 minutes time to discuss, and then we will be back and we'll have to look at some results, and maybe we can bring up with one thesis on any questions, so that we won't have to spend so much time on presentation of the boards. Then the boards will be saved on the homepage as well, and so we can just present one special sentence in the plenum at the end. So good luck and enjoy. I think everybody's back. Yes. So in our group, we had another really interesting discussion, and I think we were able to present one sentence at the end. And I'm curious what the other groups discussed and the sentences they are able to present.
So yeah, we asked about the first question if our church can learn something from the practical examples. We thought it depends on the pastors, the local communities, because everybody has kind of like a different background. And we also said that Fresh X is like a good way to kind of catch people or to stay in contact with them. But there's this big question behind this kind of like concept: is Fresh X really a church or not? But we thought that that is another question for another discussion, so we didn't answer it because of the time limit. And then we had like, what does participation look in your church context? And just like 2 quotes, like the usual thing in some of our churches are like, well, I go to church and that's it, because the pastors aren't around a lot more. They don't do a lot of activities, and you just go to service because it's like, yeah, you just do it. And another problem that arose was like the question, why do we have to go to church like in real life if we can do it online as well, which brings a lot of different problems again. Like the main thing is we need to learn to live together again and face those difficulties. Yeah, a lot of more stuff. So, and the third question, what could we as part of a worldwide economical movement learn from those experiences and so on, was like, we need to communicate a lot more, because connecting with different people from different regions helps getting to know a lot of different ideas, that you can learn a lot of different ways and opportunities, and you just can kind of like compare your situations, so you can learn this thing, this work, might work, does probably not work, and yeah, just a lot of different impulses.
Thank you very much. Then we can continue with the group 6.
Yeah, so we just very shortly talked about this, that in Italy, it's like they're really trying to create a place where, like, doing some stuff that is not Catholic, given that the Catholic Church stands very broad on it, but that the church also both have a view out to Christians, but also to other people than Christians. And then in Denmark, where church life is a bit different, given that we are a majority church, it's more like the local churches trying to make new ways or bridges out to the people who are already members, so that they can participate more. And that's all we managed to talk about.
We talked about the fact that we think that communities should, like churches should listen to their communities and hear what they need. And when they hear what they need, they can act on that. So that's basically the most important thing. If you like establish something new, you would have to make sure that it's actually needed and listen to what is needed in the community.
Okay, two sentences. One to say that we learned that it's important to give safe spaces also in churches, and that churches are not always welcoming everyone. And one sentence to give you food for thoughts, and it is the question: how can we find a place to be between relativism and exclusivism?
Is there anybody? Yes, Maximilian.
Yes, I can try to resume. So we had from countries where Protestants are a really small minority, and it is hard to have participation because the communities are really small. And just coming to service and reading the lecture maximum is the participation in our communities. But I could tell also from Transylvania that for this small community, it was a good possibility to open for all people in town, also of other confessions, through singing in choir, through using the buildings this church has, and also children groups and excursions. They got attractive for other people, and it is a well-known church due also even it is a small church. And these children groups were the link for our German member to tell about a messy church they have in his community, which is like a young family club, totally unchurchy, and they managed to bring people who would not come to church through some unconventional events. And then if they like it and come more often, then you can enter in deeper conversations. And we have this strategy of first beers on the church, and then it gets a lot. It is what we spoke about. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Maximilian.
Yeah, I would just like to have a quick moment. It was inclusive relativism and exclusive relativism, and the question in between those two was actually that if we veer into inclusive relativism, it would imply that we have this tendency as a church to have just a monologue, not including people, and whereas exclusive relativism can veer into having just, this mindset of everyone is under one umbrella, and like not really addressing the differences between minority groups and between people and the church, and not really having a dialogue as well. So the answer is more, we have to reciprocate. And that's a huge question also that struck in my head when it came to the first two groups, one with this grunge metal vibe and the other one with the cafe, and how it's a big chance to have a secularized minority group who is actually engaging in what it appears as a Christian ritual or as a Christian activity, but can be quite something else. Now, I'm just going to say I don't know the specifics of those two groups, but I just wanted to emphasize that. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. It was in addition to group 4. Now we turn over to group 3. Sorry, to group 2.
Hi, good evening, everyone. In our group, we were discussing and focusing on the social. I think the text needs to go a bit up again, where we yeah, thank you. So we were focusing in our discussion mainly on the social aspect, and it is interesting to see that although we are from different countries, in Germany, you have a big group of Protestants, in Belgium, very small minority, but nevertheless, everywhere the churches are interacting proactively with the neighborhood, by with the local community, by helping refugees, by having a kind of cafe where the community can bring a visit. So that was very interesting to see. Now, the main thesis, because that was also coming back in the presentation, is this interaction between the broader community and the churches working in two directions. Our conclusion is that the churches are acting proactively, and we believe that also in the perfect world, after a while, the neighborhood is going to participate in our churches, although that might take some time.
At the end, when we have had a lot of impressions and ideas of the relationship between Protestantism and participation, different models, and I think a good basis on which we can start further discussions in the next lectures that will come in the following weeks. We will continue on 17th November with a special questions named Church and Diaspora, and we will have a look at the situation of the possibilities of participation in the situation of being a minority. And so were some aspects that we discussed this evening, that situations are different and partly unique in the different countries, depending on if you are a majority or if Protestantism is a minority in the state. And so we'll have look at this topic, and we will have Markus Hütter, pastor in Graz, who worked until this summer as a special assistant pastor in the office of the CPCE in Vienna, and he will introduce us to this topic. At the end of this first lecture, I'd like to say thank you, first of all, to Adrian Schleifenbaum for his presence and for his questions and for his ideas and thesis he presented, and for the possibilities he opened up to think about the situation of cooperation between neighborhood and church and the interdependencies between those groups. I also have to say thank you to the other members of the board of the Digital Academy. I'd like to name people who assisted and planned and will lead the further upcoming lectures, Kathleen Müller and Oliver Engelhardt from the CPCE in Vienna, Gerhard Servatius-Deppner from CETO, Miriam Sauer from Evangelische Bund, who is unfortunately fallen ill this evening because of Big C, I think. Marcel Kehr, who the executive secretary of Evangelische Bund and who made the technical support this evening. Thank you very much. And Hans Gente, who assisted on the media. So, at least I'd like to thank you all for being here, for listening, and especially for discussing with us and for your ideas. We just managed 5 minutes over time. It's okay. Looking at the topic, and so I wish you all having a nice evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again on the 17th November. Thank you very much. Good night.